I don't even know how to start this without sounding completely crazy, but this has haunted me and my sister for years. It happened on Easter morning when I was about 11 and she was 9. We both remember every second of it exactly the same way, and no one has ever been able to explain what we saw. It still creeps me out just thinking about it. That day started out like any other Easter. My sister and I shared a room back then, and we'd planned to wake up super early to see what the Easter Bunny had left us in our baskets. But instead, we both woke up around 5 a.m. to something really weird, footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was our dad getting up early, maybe hiding eggs or something. But these footsteps were slow, heavy, and had this strange dragging sound to them, like whoever it was didn't fully pick up their feet when walking. My sister sat up in her bed at the same time as me, like she'd been listening to it too. Neither of us said a word. We just kind of looked at each other. Then we both got out of bed and tiptoed over to the door, opened it just a crack, and looked out. That's when we saw him, a tall man wearing the dirtiest, most messed up Easter Bunny costume I've ever seen in my life. He was standing completely still, facing our dad's bedroom door, not moving at all. The suit wasn't like the cute fluffy ones you see in stores or at malls. It looked old, stained, and kind of saggy in some places, like it had been stored in a damp basement for years. The fur was yellowed and matted, and the head of the costume was tilted slightly to the side in a way that made it look wrong. Not cartoonish, but almost lifeless. My sister grabbed my arm so hard I remember feeling her nails dig into my skin, but I couldn't take my eyes off the guy. He just stood there, completely still, staring at our dad's bedroom door like he was waiting for something. We didn't hear him breathing, didn't see him move, nothing. Just that awful silence, and his back to us. We must have stayed frozen there for a good 30 seconds. Then suddenly, without warning, he turned his head slightly like he heard something, and started walking, but not toward us. He walked straight toward the end of the hallway, turned the corner, and vanished out of view. Not fast, not running, just calmly walked out like he belonged there. I finally snapped out of it and ran to wake my dad up, screaming that someone was in the house. My sister was crying, trying to explain it too, but of course my dad thought we were either dreaming or trying to prank him. He checked the whole house with a baseball bat, room by room, closet by closet. All the doors were locked from the inside. Windows too. No sign of anything, or anyone. What really messed with us was how seriously my dad looked around. He wasn't mad like we were making it up. He looked genuinely on edge, like our panic had gotten to him. But after a full search, there was nothing. No footprints, no open windows, no broken locks. The only thing weird was that our front door's deadbolt was unlocked, even though my dad swore he locked it before bed. And he was the kind of guy who triple-checked that kind of stuff. Still, he just kept saying maybe we imagined it, maybe it was a dream. But I remember how real it felt. The sound of those footsteps. The smell of something weird in the hallway like mold or something wet. That awful costume. None of that felt like a dream. We didn't go back to sleep. My sister and I just stayed in the living room with all the lights on while my dad made coffee and tried to distract us by putting on cartoons. I remember staring at the hallway, waiting for that thing to come back. I kept thinking, what if he went into someone else's room? What if he was still in the house somehow? But nothing else happened that morning. Eventually, the sun came up, and everything looked so normal it made me feel like I was the one going crazy. We still had our Easter baskets on the table, like nothing had happened. It was that contrast, that horrible thing we saw versus the normal day around us, that made it so much worse. The weirdest part is that no one else in the house heard anything. My dad said he didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear our door open, nothing. And our house wasn't big. If someone was walking down the hallway, especially in heavy footsteps like we heard, you'd notice. But it was just us two. Later that day, we even brought it up to our mom. Our parents were divorced, and she was coming over to drop off some Easter stuff. And she said we probably just dreamed it because we were excited for the holiday. But both of us remembered it exactly the same way. Same time. Same costume. Same way he moved. That wasn't a dream. It couldn't have been. I didn't sleep properly for weeks after that. Over time, we stopped talking about it. But I never forgot the way that thing stood there, like it wasn't just a man in a costume. Like it was something else pretending to be something familiar. My sister still brings it up every now and then, usually around Easter. She'll say something like, "Remember the hallway?" And I'll just nod because yeah, I remember. I always will. We never saw anything like it again, and it never came back. But there's always that feeling, especially on Easter mornings, like I need to check the hallway first, just in case. Sometimes I wonder if it was someone messing with us, But that just opens up a whole other set of terrifying possibilities. Like, how did they get in? Why would someone break into a house just to stand outside a bedroom door in a costume and leave without taking anything? There were no signs of a break-in, nothing missing, no damage. And if it was someone we knew pulling a prank, who the hell would have a costume like that? It wasn't the kind of thing you'd just have lying around. It looked handmade, almost like someone had pieced it together from thrift store scraps. There was something really unsettling about it, like it was never meant to be cute or funny in the first place. Even now, as an adult, I sometimes think back and try to explain it logically, and I never can. I know what I saw. My sister knows what she saw. And I know how real it felt. The air felt heavy, and there was this weird stillness in the house that morning, like everything had paused. We weren't half asleep, and we definitely didn't imagine the same hallucination at the same time. I've read stuff online about people seeing figures in costumes or waking up to strange people in their house, but nothing ever quite matches what we experienced. It was like this quiet intrusion, like someone or something stepped into our house for a moment and then left like it never happened. To this day, we still don't know how he got in. That's what keeps me up sometimes, the fact that it happened once, silently, without explanation, and it could happen again without warning. No alarms went off, no one saw anything, and yet that thing was standing in our hallway watching. I've thought about installing cameras or motion sensors in my own house now that I live alone, but even that doesn't really make me feel safe. Because whatever it was, it didn't care about being seen. It stood there letting us watch it, like it wanted us to see it. And then it left. That part scares me the most, that it didn't try to hurt us or hide from us. It just showed up, existed, left, and then never came back. That's the part that haunts me more than anything, that there was no real ending. No closure. Nothing ever turned up on the news, no one else in our neighborhood saw anything weird, and it's not like we found anything later that could explain it. Just one quiet, messed up Easter morning that started with baskets and ended with something standing in our hallway that shouldn't have been there. I don't tell this story often because people always give me that look, like I'm making it up or exaggerating. But I know what we saw. And if you've ever woken up to something in your house that wasn't supposed to be there, then maybe you'll understand that kind of fear. I still check the hallway sometimes, just to make sure. I've never posted here before, but after what happened last Easter, I can't stop thinking about it. Maybe writing it down will help me process, or at least warn someone else. I was 17 at the time, and my mom and I were on a road trip to visit my aunt for Easter Sunday. We live in a more suburban area, so driving through the really rural parts of the state was already a little eerie for me. You know those stretches of highway where you don't see another car for like 20 minutes? That kind of place. We stopped at this old gas station around noon, one of those quiet ones with just 2 pumps and a tiny shop that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 80s. My mom went in to pay and grab snacks. I stayed in the car with the AC running because it was weirdly hot that day, and I just wanted to scroll my phone in peace. I remember locking the doors without really thinking about it, just a habit. I had music playing low and was mid-text when I felt this presence, like when someone's looking at you too hard. I glanced up and saw a man standing just outside the passenger side window, maybe mid-40s, scruffy beard, wearing a trucker cap. He smiled like he knew me, like really knew me. I didn't smile back. He mouthed something, but I couldn't hear with the windows up. Then he waved, and I swear he said my name. That's when I got a chill down my back. I kept staring, trying to figure out if I'd maybe met him before and forgotten. But I hadn't. I know I hadn't. He looked too comfortable, like he was waiting for me to roll the window down or something. I rattled through a dozen excuses in my head, but I didn't dare open my mouth. My chest tightened when he knocked on the window with the back of his hand. I pretended to text, but my thumbs were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. He leaned closer, tapping again and muttering that he knew me, like my mom had sent him. I squeezed my eyes shut, rebooting my phone to call her, but the screen still showed no bars. The station's old screen door swung behind him, but the clerk didn't even glance his way. His eyes were fixed on mine, calm and bored, like he was just killing time waiting for me to crack. For a moment I wondered if this was some awful prank, maybe he worked there, but everything felt unbearably wrong. The sweat on my palms made the steering wheel slick, and I realized I hadn't even set the parking brake properly. I wanted to scream but couldn't catch a breath. I was trapped alone with him at the pumps. Then he rattled the passenger door handle, like he'd figured out I was locked in. His face pressed against the glass, disappointed, not angry. I glanced at the shop's dusty window again, expecting someone to notice, but the cashier was staring down at the register. The sun was beating in through the roof, but I felt like I was freezing. My phone buzzed in my lap, a text from Mom saying she was taking longer than usual. Panic knotted my gut, but I typed, "Everything okay?" hoping she'd hurry. He backed off and circled to the front of the car, crouching to peer at me through my side mirror. My throat went dry as I counted his slow footsteps crunching gravel, every crunch like a countdown to disaster. Just as his hand reached for the handle again, I saw my mom's SUV pull up beside the shop window. I heard my mom's voice before I even registered what she was saying. The door popped open and she was right there, her face pale and her eyes wide. I tried to find words, but all I could do was shake as she pulled me into a quick hug. The man at the pump stopped mid-knock, his hand frozen on the metal handle. He gave us a flat look, then straightened up, slipping the cap back into place with slow movements. Without another glance, he stepped back and walked toward his truck parked by the road. Mom was already on her phone, voice urgent as she called 911 and told the clerk to check security tape. That I stared after that stranger, heart still hammering, as the police sirens started in the distance. When we finally got back in the car, I felt like I was shaking from my scalp to my toes. Mom's hands trembled on the wheel, but she said nothing, just started driving away from that place. I sat with my head pressed against the window, watching the pumps get smaller until they vanished. She parked at the next town's diner for coffee, but I barely tasted a sip. My stomach was hollow. Later that night, the station sent me a clip of the security footage showing him circling for hours. The way he parked, then got out, then walked around like he was casing cars, it made something old click. It was as if he'd studied the place, picked his moment, and decided to test me because I was alone. To this day, I still wonder why he called my name, why he tapped on the window, and why he left so quietly. We never got a name, a license plate, nothing. The footage was grainy, and the camera outside only caught the edges of his face when he wasn't looking directly at it. The cops were polite, but didn't seem too hopeful. "Could have been passing through," they said. "Happens more than you'd think out here." That sentence stuck with me. Happens more than you'd think. How many people like him are just out there? Waiting? Watching? I kept replaying it in my head. What if I'd opened the door? What if my mom had taken 5 minutes longer? He didn't look frantic. He looked sure. Like he expected it to work eventually. Like he'd done it before. The worst part is that he didn't run. He just walked away like it hadn't worked this time. As if it was normal. Like he'd try again somewhere else, with someone else. I think that's what keeps me up at night, not what happened, but what didn't happen. That gut-deep certainty that if my mom hadn't come back right then, I wouldn't be writing this. I don't go on road trips anymore, not alone, not even with someone. I check every lock twice, and I don't sit in parked cars without someone nearby. People say, it could have been worse, like that's comforting, but it's not. It's terrifying, because I felt how close it was to being worse. And I still have no idea who that man was, or how he knew my name. I know this might sound like nothing at first, but I swear something was off that day. It was right after our Easter dinner. We'd spent the day with my parents and my younger sister's family at this quiet little seafood place near the coast. Not fancy, but kind of our tradition. I remember we took the ferry over around noon, and while waiting to board, I noticed these two guys. Mid-40s maybe, both in jackets that looked too warm for the weather. They weren't talking to each other, but they were clearly together. I remember that because they just stood there, quiet, like they were watching people. I brushed it off as me just people watching like usual, but something about them stayed in my mind. Fast forward to the end of dinner. We're all full, joking around, and I'm helping my nephew with his jacket when I look up and freeze. The same two guys from the ferry? They're sitting at a table on the other side of the restaurant. Not eating. No drinks. Just sitting. Staring. One of them met my eyes, and I got that weird gut punch feeling, like when your brain knows something's wrong before you do. I pointed them out to my husband quietly, but when he looked, they had turned away. He just shrugged and told me it was probably a coincidence. Maybe they took the same ferry we did and ended up here too. I wanted to believe that. I really did. When we got up to leave, I made a point of looking over at their table again. They were still there, still not eating. One of them had his phone out, but it didn't look like he was doing anything on it, just holding it like a prop. The other one had his hands folded on the table and was watching us. I could feel it. It wasn't casual glancing. It felt intentional. As we walked out, I tried not to look paranoid, but I checked behind us through the reflection on the glass door. One of the men stood up. Just one. The taller one. My chest tightened a bit, but I told myself I was being dramatic. Still, I nudged my husband and muttered that I thought one of them was following us. He looked back and said, "I don't see anything," and kept walking like nothing was wrong. But I did. When we crossed the street to the small public parking lot, I spotted him again. Not close, but not far either. Just walking, kind of casually, like he wasn't following us, but somehow always ended up on the same path. I started to feel this cold sweat building behind my neck. It was almost 8 p.m., the sky already darkening, and the parking lot lights hadn't even come on yet. I told my sister, and she literally laughed and said, "You watch too much true crime." I wanted to believe she was right, that it was just a case of nerves or some weird coincidence. But that feeling in my gut, it wasn't going away. We got to the car, and I was rushing at that point, fumbling with the keys while trying not to look panicked in front of the kids. I could hear my husband telling me to calm down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked back one last time before getting in, and there he was, just standing near the exit of the parking lot. Not moving, not pretending to be on his phone, just standing there like he was waiting for something. It didn't make sense. He wasn't looking at us directly, but I knew he saw us. The way he angled his body, like he was ready to follow. It was like he was waiting for us to leave first. We drove off, and I kept checking the mirrors like a maniac. For the first few turns, I didn't see anything. But then, just as we were about to merge back toward the ferry route, I spotted a dark gray SUV that looked a hell of a lot like the one I remembered parked near the guys at the restaurant. Same make, same dull color, no front plate. It stayed behind us for about 15 minutes, never too close, never too far. My husband still thought I was overreacting, even made a joke about how I should write a mystery novel. But the more I watched that car keeping pace with ours, the more sure I was that it wasn't just some random driver. I wasn't scared for me at that point. I was scared because of the kids in the back seat. And that fear just kept getting worse. At some point, my husband got annoyed with me checking the rear view so much and pulled into a random gas station, just to prove there was nothing going on. "See," he said, pointing to the empty road behind us. And yeah, for a second, it looked like the SUV was gone. I got out to use the bathroom and calm myself down a bit. The lights inside the station were harsh and flickery, but it felt safe, normal. When I came back out, though, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Across the street, just barely visible behind a row of trees, was that same SUV. Parked. Headlights off. No movement. I didn't even say anything. I just got back in the car and told him we needed to go. Now, the rest of the drive felt like a blur. We kept changing streets, taking different turns, even drove through a random neighborhood we didn't know, just to see if anyone was tailing us. And every time we thought we'd shaken it, that SUV showed up again. Not in a way that screamed chase, but more like persistence. Like someone just making sure we didn't go somewhere they didn't want us to. At that point, everyone in the car started realizing this wasn't just me being paranoid. My sister stopped making jokes. The kids were quiet. My husband was gripping the steering wheel harder than usual. There was a tension in the air that I'll never forget. It felt like something was closing in, even though we couldn't see what or why. Eventually, we made it back to the ferry terminal. I thought maybe being around more people would help, that whoever was behind this wouldn't dare keep following us in a place with cameras and lights and attendants. But even then, I couldn't relax. I scanned every car waiting in line, every person standing near the dock. And then I saw him again, the same man from the restaurant, standing near a vending machine, pretending to scroll on his phone. Only this time, he wasn't even trying that hard to blend in. He looked up at me, didn't smile, didn't look away. Just stared. I turned around and told my husband we weren't getting on that ferry. I don't even know where that came from, it just burst out. I couldn't get on there knowing he might follow us again, especially if we were stuck in one place for that long. We ended up driving back around and finding a small hotel about 15 minutes away. Not ideal, but I just needed to put walls between us and whatever the hell was going on. We checked in fast, no luggage, nothing. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every time a car pulled into the lot, I got up to peek through the curtain. And here's the part one haven't told many people. At around 3:40 a.m., I looked outside one last time, and I swear to God, I saw that same SUV parked across the street again. No lights, no movement, just sitting there. When I looked again a few minutes later, it was gone. The next morning, We left as soon as the sun came up. We didn't even bother with breakfast. I didn't see the SUV again, and we managed to catch a ferry back without incident. The whole ride home, no one really spoke about what happened. My husband tried to downplay it like it was probably nothing, but I could tell he didn't believe that anymore. My sister kept looking out the window, and the kids were unusually quiet, like they could feel the shift in energy too. We got home, locked every door, every window, and just sat in silence for a while. I've gone over that day in my head 100 times since then, trying to find some rational explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they were just creepy guys and nothing more. But that doesn't explain why they kept showing up. It doesn't explain why I still get chills thinking about that man's face at the ferry terminal. What really gets me is how suddenly it all just stopped. No more sightings. No more SUV. Nothing. Like it never happened. But I know what I saw. I know how I felt. That fear wasn't in my head. It was real, it was heavy, and I still carry it with me every time I go somewhere crowded or see someone lingering too long near my car. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, and maybe I never will. But something about that day felt wrong from the very start, and I can't shake the feeling that, for whatever reason, we were being watched, and maybe even chosen for something. And that thought still keeps me up some nights.